A girl thought she rescued a puppy in the pouring rain, but weeks later she realizes it's not a dog at all. Because what started as a sweet act of kindness has turned into a dangerous secret. She cradled it like family, fed it from her own plate, whispered her deepest fears into its fur, but then came the warning. Shredded blankets, raw meat missing from the fridge, and those eyes, wild, burning amber. Now the neighbors are losing chickens. A shotgun glints in the dark. And her mum? She just made a call that could change everything. When the knock comes at the door, there's only one question left. How far will she run? To protect the creature she loves more than anything. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. The evening wrapped around them like a thick, wet blanket as Mia sat quietly in the passenger seat of her mum's old sedan. The windshield wipers worked overtime, swooshing back and forth in a desperate attempt to keep up with the relentless downpour. Their rusty rhythm matched the drumming of rain against the car roof, creating a symphony of water and mechanical persistence. Mia hugged her sketchbook close to her chest, her fingers tracing the worn edges of its cover. The familiar smell of Grandma's pot roast still lingered on her clothes, a comfort against the gloomy weather outside. Through the foggy window, the world looked like a watercolor painting gone wrong, trees bleeding into darkness, their branches reaching out like ghostly fingers into the night. Her mom hummed softly beside her, an old lullaby that barely carried over the storm's rumble. Mia could see the exhaustion etched across her mother's face, the slight droop of her shoulders telling the story of another long double shift at the diner. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the narrow road that wound through the woods like a ribbon. "Did you have fun at Grandma's?" her mom asked, her voice gentle against the storm's percussion. "Yeah," Mia nodded, watching water cascade down the passenger window. She liked my new drawings. The car swayed slightly as they navigated around a bend, the drainage ditches on either side of the road swollen with rainwater. Mia pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the shadows dance in the headlights' beam. Her mind wandered to the stack of homework waiting at home, when suddenly something caught her eye. There, at the edge of the ditch, a small shape, trembling in the harsh glare of the headlights. Mia's heart leaped into her throat. "Stop!" she cried out, her hand shooting forward to grab her mom's arm. "There's something there!" The brakes squealed in protest as her mom brought the car to an abrupt halt, the seatbelt catching against Mia's chest. "What? What is it?" Without waiting for further discussion, Mia unbuckled her seatbelt and threw open the car door. The rain hit her like 1,000 tiny needles, instantly soaking through her jacket. She could hear her mom calling after her, but the sound was muffled by the storm and the pounding of her own heart. Mud squished beneath her sneakers as she ran toward the small figure. As she got closer, she could make out matted fur and long, gangly legs. The creature looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes that reflected the car's headlights like amber mirrors. Mia dropped to her knees in the mud, ignoring the cold seeping through her jeans. The animal, what looked like a puppy, tried to back away, but its movement was hindered by an obvious limp in its hind leg. "It's okay," Mia whispered, extending her hand slowly. "I won't hurt you." She heard splashing footsteps behind her as her mum approached, holding her jacket over her head in a futile attempt to stay dry. "Mia, honey, what are you—" Her mum's voice trailed off as she saw the trembling creature. "Please, Mum," Mia begged, already reaching out to scoop up the soaked animal. It whimpered, but didn't resist as she gathered it in her arms. Its fur was cold and muddy against her chest, its whole body shaking with fear or cold, or both. "Just for tonight. We can't leave it here." "Mia, we can't," her mom started, but Mia turned to face her, rain mixing with the tears on her cheeks. "Please," she pleaded. "It's hurt. It'll die out here." Her mum's expression softened as she looked at her daughter, drenched and determined, cradling the shivering animal. With a deep sigh that seemed to come from her very soul, she nodded. The drive home was quick but tense, with Mia holding the muddy creature wrapped in her jacket. When they finally pulled into their driveway, both mother and daughter were soaked to the bone. Inside, her mom spread an old towel near the heater, while Mia carefully carried her precious cargo. Setting the animal down gently on the towel, Mia knelt beside it, her wet clothes leaving puddles on the floor. The creature's big ears twitched as it looked around the room with nervous curiosity. Mia stroked its damp fur, feeling its racing heartbeat begin to slow. "You're safe now," she whispered as the rain continued its relentless assault on the roof above them. The small creature seemed to understand, pressing closer against her chest and finally allowing its tired eyes to close. Mom stood in the kitchen, hands on her hips, her wet hair still dripping onto the linoleum floor. "All right, listen carefully," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "If this animal is staying tonight, we need some ground rules." Mia nodded eagerly, still kneeling beside the trembling creature. Her clothes were creating a small puddle around her, but she didn't seem to notice or care. "First, it stays in the laundry room. No exceptions. We don't know if it's sick or—" Mom paused, studying the animal more closely. "Well, we just need to be careful. Second, you need to get changed into dry clothes right now before you catch a cold." "Okay," Mia agreed quickly, willing to accept any conditions as long as she could keep her new friend safe. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 9:30 p.m., its green numbers casting a soft glow in the dim kitchen. Thunder still rolled outside, though the storm had lessened to a steady drum of rain against the windows. Mom rummaged through the fridge, pulling out leftover chicken from Tuesday's dinner. She placed it on a chipped blue plate while Mia warmed some milk in a shallow bowl. "Here you go," Mia cooed, setting both offerings in front of their unexpected guest. The animal's nose twitched, and without hesitation, it dove into the food. Mia burst into giggles as she watched it devour the chicken, making tiny snuffling sounds of contentment. "Look how hungry he was," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with delight. She watched as the creature lapped up the milk, its pink tongue darting in and out rapidly. "I think I'll call him Toby." "Toby?" Mum asked, raising an eyebrow as she gathered fresh towels from the linen closet. "Like in Toby's Great Adventure. Remember? The book you used to read to me?" Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement. "He was brave and loyal and always helped others, just like this little guy will be." After changing into dry pajamas, Mia settled on the laundry room floor with her sketchbook. The washing machine hummed quietly behind her, providing a gentle white noise that almost masked the continuing storm outside. Toby, now fed and somewhat cleaner thanks to Mom's careful toweling, sat watching her with curious eyes. Mia's pencil moved across the paper, capturing Toby's distinctive features. Those large ears, the pointed nose, the intelligent eyes that seemed to follow her every movement. As she drew, words began spilling out softly, secrets she hadn't shared with anyone. "You know, it's been really quiet here since Dad left," she whispered, adding shading to Toby's fur. "Mom works so much now, and sometimes it feels like the house is too big and empty." Her pencil paused as she swallowed hard. "But you're here now, and maybe it won't feel so lonely anymore." Toby tilted his head, as if actually listening to her words, and Mia felt her heart swell with affection. She reached out to scratch behind his ears, and to her delight, he leaned into her touch. The creak of floorboards announced Mom's presence before she appeared in the doorway. She stood there for a moment, watching her daughter. Something in her expression softened as she saw Mia's genuine smile, the first real one in weeks. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Mom said gently. "It's getting late." Mia looked up, ready to protest, but caught herself. She didn't want to push her luck tonight. "Okay," she agreed, closing her sketchbook. She gave Toby one last pat before standing up. Mom helped tuck her into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin just like she used to when Mia was younger. The familiar gesture made Mia's chest feel warm and full. "We'll see in the morning," Mom whispered, pressing a kiss to Mia's forehead. The words held neither promise nor rejection, but they were enough for now. Back in the laundry room, Toby circled 3 times on the old blanket Mom had laid out for him before settling down. His amber eyes caught the dim light filtering through the doorway, glinting with an unusual brightness before slowly closing. Outside, the storm was finally dying down, its fury spent. The house grew quiet, save for the occasional drip of rain from the gutters and the soft whir of the heating system. The night settled in around them all, wrapping the household in its peaceful embrace. Golden morning light filtered through the thin yellow curtains of Mia's bedroom, painting warm stripes across her quilted bedspread. Her eyes flew open, heart suddenly racing as memories of last night flooded back. She threw off her covers and padded quickly down the hallway in her sock feet, barely breathing until she reached the laundry room door. "Toby," she whispered, easing it open. A small, excited yelp greeted her. There he was, very much real, and not just a dream. Wagging his unusually bushy tail with enthusiasm, his fur had dried into a reddish-brown color, and his amber eyes sparkled in the morning light. The sight of him made Mia's heart feel like it might burst with joy. "Good morning?" she cooed, kneeling down to scratch behind his ears. "Want to go outside?" Toby responded by bouncing toward the back door, though Mia noticed he still favored his back legs slightly. She opened the door, and together they stepped out into the crisp morning air. The storm had washed everything clean, leaving the world feeling fresh and new. Birds chittered in the maple trees, and the sun sparkled off dewdrops clinging to blades of grass. Toby sniffed around the yard with surprising energy, despite his limp, investigating every bush and flower bed while Mia watched. She couldn't stop smiling as he explored, his nose twitching constantly, ears swiveling to catch every sound. When they came back inside, Mom was already in the kitchen making coffee. The familiar scent mixed with toast filled the air as Mia poured cereal into a bowl, stealing glances at her mother's expression. Mom looked tired, but thoughtful as she sat down at the table with her steaming mug. "So," Mom began, and Mia held her breath. "I've been thinking about our guest." Mia gripped her spoon tighter, milk dribbling back into her bowl. "We can keep him, for now," Mom said slowly, holding up a hand as Mia's face lit up. "But you're responsible. That means feeding him, cleaning up after him, everything. Do you understand?" "Yes. Oh yes, I promise." Mia practically glowed with happiness, bouncing in her chair. "I'll do everything, Mom. You won't have to worry about anything." That afternoon, they drove to Pete's General Store on Main Street. The little bell above the door jingled as they entered, and Mr. Pete himself greeted them from behind the counter. They found a basic red leash and collar in the pet section, along with a bag of puppy kibble that didn't cost too much. As they loaded their purchases into the car, Mr. Holt from next door appeared, walking his usual route to the post office. His weathered face creased into what might have been trying to be a friendly expression but came across more like a grimace. "Well, well," he called out, eyeing Toby. "Got yourself a new pet, I see. Hope that mutt won't be stealing my hens." Mia instinctively pulled Toby closer to her legs, while Mom forced a polite smile. "Don't worry, Mr. Holt. We'll keep him well-fed and supervised." Back home, Mia decided Toby needed a proper bath. She filled a plastic storage tub with warm water in the bathroom and tried to lift him in. Toby had other ideas. He squirmed and wriggled, splashing water everywhere as Mia attempted to wet his fur with the plastic cup Mom had provided. "Hold still!" Mia giggled, but Toby responded by shaking vigorously, sending a spray of water all over her face. She burst into uncontrollable laughter, nearly dropping the cup of shampoo she was holding. Mom appeared in the doorway, probably drawn by the commotion. She took in the scene. Water everywhere, her daughter soaked and laughing, Toby looking somehow both proud and sheepish, and couldn't help but smile despite herself. Later that night, Mia snuggled into bed, feeling happier than she had in months. From down the hall came the soft sounds of Toby scratching around in his new crate, settling in for the night. It felt like the beginning of something new and wonderful, like a fresh page in her sketchbook just waiting to be filled. Crisp autumn leaves crunched beneath Mia's sneakers as she walked along the dirt path that wound behind their house. School had just let out, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees. Toby trotted beside her, his leash loose in her hand, his reddish-brown fur gleaming in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the canopy of red and gold leaves overhead. His paws made barely a sound on the path, so different from the clumsy thump of most puppies. And then Jessica said we could work together on the science project. Mia chatted, smiling down at her companion. His tail swished gently from side to side, as if encouraging her to continue. We're thinking about doing something with plants, maybe showing how they grow toward light. Mrs. Henderson said it's called phototropism, I think. Something like that. Toby's ears swiveled toward her voice, the thin cartilage catching the golden afternoon light. Mia felt that familiar warmth in her chest spread outward to her fingertips. It was nice having someone to talk to, even if he couldn't talk back. Since Dad left, the house had gotten so quiet sometimes. The silence would stretch between her and Mom like an invisible wall neither knew how to break. A sudden rustling in the branches above made Toby freeze mid-step. Mia watched as his whole body tensed, his head snapping up to track a grey squirrel that had just leaped between trees. Something about his posture changed. Gone was the playful pup she'd been chatting with. In his place stood a predator, crouched low, every muscle coiled like a spring. His bushy tail went rigid, and his nose twitched with tiny, rapid movements. A shiver ran down Mia's spine, prickling the skin at the nape of her neck. She'd seen dogs chase squirrels before, but this felt different. More natural, more wild. Toby's amber eyes tracked the creature with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. There was something ancient in that stare, something that didn't belong in a backyard pet. Come on, boy. She tugged gently at the leash, suddenly eager to get home. Let's go home. Mum's making spaghetti tonight. That evening, Mom stirred a pot of spaghetti sauce while Mia set the table. The kitchen smelled of garlic and oregano, the savory aroma usually one of Mia's favorites, but there was tension in the air that had nothing to do with dinner. Mum's shoulders were tight, her movement stiffer than usual as she tapped the wooden spoon against the pot's edge. Earl Holt stopped by the diner today, Mum said carefully, not turning from the stove. Her voice had that too casual tone that always meant trouble. Says 3 of his chickens have gone missing this week, just vanished from his coop. Mia's hand froze halfway to placing a fork. Her heart did a little stutter step in her chest. What do you mean? He thinks something's been getting into his coop at night. Mum finally turned around, her expression serious, the worry lines around her eyes deeper than usual. You keep that dog close, Mia. We can't risk any trouble with the neighbors. Earl was already giving me that look. You know the one. Toby never leaves our yard, Mia protested, but her voice wavered slightly, betraying her doubt. Just yesterday, she'd let him off leash for a little while, convinced he wouldn't go far. He'd disappeared into the bushes for maybe 10 minutes before coming back, looking pleased with himself. His muzzle hadn't been dirty or anything, but still. After dinner, Mia noticed Toby lingering near the trash can, nose twitching eagerly at the scraps of chicken they'd thrown away. His eyes were fixed on the bin with an intensity that seemed almost unnatural. She shooed him away, but something nagged at her mind. Normal puppies begged at the table, not at the trash. In her bedroom, Mia opened her laptop and typed, "Why does my puppy act like a hunter?" Her fingers hovered uncertainly before hitting enter. The search results made her stomach twist into a tight knot. Pictures of wild animals popped up, wolves, coyotes, and foxes. She clicked through images of fox cubs, noting their pointed ears, bushy tails, and amber eyes. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The same slender muzzle, the same delicate black legs, the same white-tipped tail. No, she whispered, closing the laptop quickly with a snap that sounded too loud in the quiet room. But the seed of doubt had been planted, growing stronger with each remembered detail. The way he moved with silent grace, his strange yips instead of barks, how he stalked rather than played. The way other dogs at the park seemed confused by him. When night fell, Mia couldn't sleep. The moon cast silver light through her window, painting ghostly patterns on her bedspread, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted its lonely call. She grabbed her flashlight from the bedside drawer and crept downstairs, careful to skip the creaky third step that always seemed to groan no matter how lightly you stepped on it. The back door opened silently as she slipped outside, the cool air raising goosebumps along her arms. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching winter. Overhead, stars pierced the darkness like tiny holes in a black blanket. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the yard until it found what she was looking for. Toby crouched near the fence, his whole body alert and still as a statue. His ears were pricked forward, aimed toward the distant sound of sleepy clucking from Holt's chicken coop. In the flashlight's glow, his eyes reflected green gold, wild and ancient. Eyes that had never belonged to any dog. They were the eyes of something that belonged to the forest, to the darkness, to a world Mia had never known. "You're just a puppy, right?" Mia whispered into the darkness, her breath fogging slightly in the cold night air. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying away her question like it had never been asked. Toby remained motionless, staring into the night with unwavering focus, and suddenly Mia wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Some truths were better left in the shadows, where they couldn't change everything. Dawn crept through Mia's window, painting her room in soft golden light. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning with worries about Toby. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the heating system as she padded down the hallway in her sock feet. Her heart skipped when she reached the laundry room. Toby's blanket lay in tatters, strips of fabric scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. The familiar smell of laundry detergent mixed with something else, a sharp metallic scent that made her nose wrinkle. It reminded her of raw hamburger, but stronger, wilder. In the kitchen, Mom stood at the counter in her blue bathrobe, spreading butter on toast. The coffee maker gurgled cheerfully, filling the room with its warm aroma. Everything seemed so normal until the phone rang. Mom answered with a quiet, "Hello." Mia pretended to look for cereal while straining to hear the conversation. "Yes, I saw the tracks this morning." Mom's voice was low, careful. "No, I understand completely." She glanced at Mia, then turned away. "We'll handle it, Earl, I promise." The phone clicked back into its cradle. Mom took a deep breath before saying in a deliberately casual voice, "That was Mr. Holt. Seems he's missing another hen." Mia's hands trembled as she poured milk into a bowl. Mom's tone was light, but her shoulders were tense, her smile tight around the edges. Neither of them mentioned the shredded blanket in the laundry room. After school, Mia clutched a handful of dog treats in the backyard. She'd watched dog training videos during lunch, determined to prove Toby could be just like any other pet. The autumn air was crisp, leaves dancing around her feet in the light breeze. "Sit," she commanded, holding up a treat. Toby cocked his head, those intelligent amber eyes fixed on her face. "Come on, boy, sit." He took a step toward the treat, then froze. A sparrow had landed on a low branch of the maple tree. In an instant, Toby's whole demeanor changed. His body lowered, muscles coiling like springs. "No!" Mia shouted, but he was already moving. He launched himself toward the tree with shocking speed and grace, nothing like the clumsy puppy she'd found in the rain. His jaws snapped shut inches from the bird's tail feathers as it escaped skyward. Mia's heart pounded. She'd never seen a dog jump that high, move that fast. It wasn't just the way he hunted, it was how natural it looked, like he'd been born to do it. Later, in her room with the door closed, Mia's fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard. She took a deep breath and typed, "Can foxes look like puppies?" The search results loaded, and her stomach clenched. Pictures of red fox kits filled the screen, their features hauntingly familiar. The same pointed muzzle as Toby, the same bushy tail with its white tip. One photo showed a young fox about Toby's size, and the resemblance was undeniable. She clicked through wildlife websites, reading about fox behavior, their hunting instincts, their ability to leap, their preference for poultry. Everything fit, everything made sense. But accepting it felt like watching her dream of having a dog shatter into pieces. That night, Mom didn't question when Mia asked if Toby could sleep in her room. Maybe she was too tired from her shift at the diner, or maybe she saw the worry in her daughter's eyes and understood. Mia lay in bed, covers pulled up to her chin, watching Toby curled up on her rug. The streetlight outside cast shadows through her window, making patterns on his reddish fur. Fear and love twisted together in her chest like tangled yarn. Fear of what he was, love for who he'd become to her. "You're not a dog," she whispered into the darkness. "Are you?" Toby lifted his head at the sound of her voice. His eyes met hers in the dim light, and he blinked slowly, almost like he understood. Then he stood, padded over to her bed, and rested his head gently on her foot. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the window in a gentle rhythm. Mia lay still, listening to the sound and feeling the weight of Toby's head on her foot, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching dust motes in its golden beams. Mia sat at the worn wooden table, pushing cereal around her bowl, while Mom sorted through a stack of envelopes, her coffee going cold beside her. "These bills just keep coming," Mom muttered, more to herself than to Mia. She ran a hand through her uncombed hair, dark circles visible under her eyes. "Maybe we should sell that old dresser from the spare room, the antique one your grandmother gave us." Mia's spoon clinked against her bowl. That dresser had been in their family for generations. Her throat tightened as she watched her mother's tired fingers shuffling through the papers, knowing Toby's food and supplies were part of their mounting expenses. "Mom, I could help," Mia offered quietly. "Maybe do some yard work for the neighbors?" Her mother's face softened. "You're sweet, honey, but that's not your job." She forced a smile. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Mia nodded, the weight of her secret about Toby pressing heavily on her chest. She wanted to tell Mom everything, about the research she'd done, about what Toby really was, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she watched her mother's shoulders slump under the weight of another bill and made a silent decision. She would protect both of them, Mom and Toby, no matter what it took. At school, Mrs. Peterson's fifth-grade classroom buzzed with excitement. A wildlife volunteer named Ms. Carter stood at the front, her green uniform neat and official-looking. The projector hummed as she clicked through her presentation about local animals. "Now, this next slide is very important," Ms. Carter said, clicking forward. The words, "Red Fox Kits, What to Do If You Find One," appeared in bold letters across the screen. Mia's blood ran cold. The image showed a young fox, almost identical to Toby, the same pointed ears, the same white-tipped tail, even the same intelligent gleam in its amber eyes. Her pencil clattered to the floor, but she barely noticed. "If you find a fox kit," Miss Carter continued, "it's crucial not to intervene. Even if it seems abandoned, its mother is usually nearby. Taking in wild animals is not only dangerous, but illegal. They need to remain in their natural habitat." The word illegal echoed in Mia's head. She sank lower in her seat, certain that everyone could hear her heart hammering against her ribs. Jimmy Martinez, who sat next to her, was doodling rockets in his notebook, completely uninterested. No one was looking at her. No one had made the connection. After school, Mia walked home with Toby, keeping to the back roads where fewer people ventured. The autumn wind rustled through dried leaves, and clouds gathered overhead, threatening rain. "You have to be more careful," she whispered to Toby, who trotted beside her. "No more running around where people can see you." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. Especially not Mr. Holt. He already suspects something. Toby's ears twitched at her voice, but his eyes remained fixed on the tree line, alert for movement. He looked less and less like a dog every day, and Mia's heart ached with the weight of protecting him. That night, after Mum had gone to bed, Mia crept downstairs to the kitchen. The linoleum was cold under her bare feet as she opened the refrigerator, its light casting a bright rectangle across the dark floor. She pulled out leftover chicken and some hamburger meat, careful not to let the packages crinkle too loudly. Toby watched from his spot near the back door as she mixed the meat into his regular food. His tail swished back and forth, eyes gleaming in the dim light from the street lamp outside. "I know this is what you really need," Mia whispered, setting down the bowl. She knelt beside him as he ate, running her fingers through his russet fur. "I'll keep you safe, no matter what." The kitchen was quiet except for the soft sounds of Toby eating and the distant hum of crickets through the window. But outside, in the shadows of the yard, a small orange glow punctured the darkness. Mr. Holt stood motionless, his cigarette's ember bright against the night, watching the scene unfold through the kitchen window. The aroma of grilled hamburgers and hot dogs wafted across Grandma's backyard. Picnic tables dotted the grass, laden with potato salad, corn on the cob, and Mum's famous coleslaw. Mia sat cross-legged on a checkered blanket, keeping a firm grip on Toby's leash while her relatives chatted and laughed around them. "Doesn't that bandana look silly on him?" Mia's mum teased, reaching down to ruffle Toby's fur. The red cloth around his neck helped hide his pointed features, making him look more like an ordinary puppy. Mia had picked it out carefully, hoping it would draw attention away from his increasingly fox-like appearance. "I think he looks handsome," Mia defended, adjusting the fabric. Her heart skipped whenever someone looked too closely at Toby, but so far, no one had questioned his unusual appearance. "Doggy!" 4-year-old Lily came toddling across the lawn, her blonde pigtails bouncing. She plopped down beside Mia and threw her arms around Toby's neck. To Mia's relief, Toby remained perfectly still, allowing the little girl's enthusiastic embrace. "Gentle, Lily," Mia reminded her cousin. "He's still kind of shy." "He's so soft," Lily giggled, patting Toby's head with surprising gentleness. "Can I give him a hot dog?" Before Mia could answer, a distant rumble of thunder made everyone look up. Dark clouds had snuck up on them, transforming the sunny afternoon into an ominous grey. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of rain. "Weather alert on my phone," Uncle Jim called out. "Storm's coming in fast." The peaceful gathering erupted into chaos. Adults rushed to gather paper plates and plastic cups before they could blow away. Grandma directed traffic from the porch, pointing where to store the folding chairs. Mom and Aunt Sarah hurried to save the food, covering dishes with aluminum foil and rushing them inside. "Mia, help your mother!" Grandma called over the rising wind. Mia stood up, keeping Toby's leash wrapped tightly around her hand. She looked down at Lily, who had been sitting beside her just moments ago, but the little girl was gone. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Mia scanned the yard. No sign of Lily's pink dress or blonde pigtails. A knot formed in her stomach. "Lily," she called out, her voice nearly lost in the commotion. No answer. "Has anyone seen Lily?" Nobody seemed to hear her over the sound of thunder and rushing feet. Mia's eyes darted to the creek at the edge of the property, Lily's favorite place to watch for frogs. Her heart stopped. "Lily!" Mia shouted, running toward the tree line. The rain was falling steadily now, making the ground slick under her feet. Toby trotted beside her, his ears perked forward. Another crack of thunder boomed overhead. Suddenly, Toby's body went rigid. His nose lifted to the air, and before Mia could tighten her grip, he yanked the leash free from her hand. To her shock, he let out a sharp bark, the first time she'd ever heard him make such a sound, and darted ahead into the trees. "Toby, wait!" Mia crashed through the underbrush after him, branches whipping at her face. The creek came into view, its usually gentle waters now brown and angry with storm runoff. Toby stood at the edge, barking urgently and pawing at something. That's when Mia saw her. Lily was clinging to a fallen log that stretched across the water, her pink dress soaked and muddy. The little girl's eyes were wide with terror as the current swirled around her. "Hold on, Lily!" Mia splashed into the creek without hesitation. The cold water shocked her, but she pushed forward, reaching for her cousin. Toby scrambled along the log, his claws finding purchase where Lily's small hands were slipping. Mia wrapped her arms around Lily's waist and pulled. With Toby providing support from above, they managed to drag the frightened child back to solid ground. Lily burst into tears, clinging to Mia like a wet koala. "I got you," Mia murmured, hugging her cousin fiercely. "You're safe now." She looked at Toby, who stood guard beside them, his fur plastered to his body from the rain. "You're both safe." Shouts echoed through the trees as their family members finally noticed their absence. Within moments, a crowd of worried adults surrounded them. Mum wrapped them both in a blanket, while Aunt Sarah sobbed and hugged Lily. "Mia, you're a hero," Uncle Jim declared, patting her shoulder. "How did you know where to find her?" Mia glanced at Toby, who had retreated to the edge of the group, unnoticed by the celebrating family. "I just followed my instincts," she said softly. Later, as they drove home through the storm, headlights illuminated a familiar truck driving slowly past them. Mr. Holt's weathered face appeared in the window, his eyes narrowing as they fixed on Toby in the back seat. Thunder rolled overhead, matching the nervous pounding of Mia's heart. Rain drizzled against the kitchen window as Mum's voice grew sharper with each word. "He's just a puppy, Earl. You can't threaten us like this." She paced back and forth, the phone pressed tight against her ear, her free hand clenched into a fist. Mia sat at the kitchen table, absently pushing cereal around in her bowl. Toby lay at her feet, his ears twitching at Mum's rising tone. The morning light was grey and dim, matching the tension in the room. "No, you listen to me." Mum's face reddened. "Don't you dare!" She pulled the phone away and stared at it, her jaw clenched. Holt had hung up on her. "What did he say?" Mia asked quietly, though she already knew it wouldn't be good news. Mum slammed the phone onto the counter. "That man had the nerve to tell me if we don't get rid of that dog, he'll handle it himself." She made air quotes with her fingers, her voice trembling with anger. "Who does he think he is, making threats?" Toby shifted closer to Mia's legs, sensing the tension. His tail, which had grown increasingly bushier over the weeks, curled protectively around his body. Mum turned to face Mia, her expression shifting from anger to concern. "Honey, what's really going on? Why is that dog causing so much trouble?" She pulled out a chair and sat down, reaching across the table to take Mia's hand. "First the missing chickens, now these threats. There's something you're not telling me, isn't there?" Mia's throat felt tight. She looked down at Toby, at his pointed ears and the distinctive black markings around his eyes that had become more pronounced. The truth she'd been hiding felt like a stone in her chest. "Because—" Mia's voice cracked. She squeezed her mom's hand, tears welling up in her eyes. "Because he's not a dog." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mum's hand went slack in Mia's grip. "What do you mean he's not a dog?" Mum's voice was barely a whisper. He's a fox." The confession tumbled out along with Mia's tears. "I figured it out weeks ago. That night in the storm, he wasn't a puppy. He was a fox kit. I'm sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you." Mum shot up from her chair, backing away from the table. "A fox? Mia, do you have any idea?" She pressed her hands to her temples, pacing the kitchen floor. "This is illegal. We could get in serious trouble. What if he has diseases? What if he hurts someone?" "He won't." Mia slid off her chair and knelt beside Toby, wrapping her arms around his neck. "He saved Lily, remember? He's gentle and smart and—" Her voice broke into sobs. "He's all I have since Dad left." The raw pain in Mia's voice stopped Mom in her tracks. She stood frozen by the sink, one hand pressed against her mouth, anger melting into helplessness as she watched her daughter cling to the wild animal they'd unknowingly welcomed into their home. "Oh, Mia," Mum whispered, her own eyes growing wet. The sudden crunch of tires on wet gravel cut through the moment. Through the kitchen window, red and blue lights pulsed faintly, casting eerie shadows through the rain-streaked curtains. Mum's face went pale. "They're here." "Who's here?" Mia's arms tightened around Toby. I called the wildlife officer this morning, Mom admitted softly. Before Holt called, I knew something wasn't right, and I wanted professional advice. I didn't know then that... Heavy boots crunched up the gravel path toward their front door. Mia buried her face in Toby's fur, feeling his heart beating fast against her chest. The moment stretched like taffy, filled only with the sound of approaching footsteps and the soft patter of rain. Then came the knock, loud and official, echoing through their small house like a thunderclap. The knock reverberated through the small house like a hammer strike. Mia's arms tightened around Toby until he let out a soft whimper, making her loosen her grip slightly. Her heart thundered in her chest as she watched Mom smooth her shirt and force a shaky smile before walking to the front door. The old hinges creaked as Mom pulled it open, revealing 2 wildlife officers standing on the rain-soaked porch. Water dripped steadily from the brims of their forest green caps, their matching jackets dark with moisture. The taller officer stepped forward, his badge catching the dim porch light. "Evening, Mom," he said, his voice carrying a practiced blend of authority and politeness. "We've had reports of a fox being kept on your property." His eyes moved past Mom, scanning the entryway behind her. Mom's fingers fidgeted with the doorframe. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "It's just a dog. My daughter found him during that big storm a few weeks ago." The second officer, a younger woman with kind eyes, shared a knowing look with her partner. "Mom, we've received multiple reports, including photographs. Would you mind if we came in to discuss this?" Mom hesitated, then stepped aside. Rainwater pooled on the welcome mat as the officers entered, their boots leaving damp prints on the floor. The lead officer removed his cap, revealing graying temples that matched his weathered face. "I understand this might be difficult," he said, his tone softening as he spotted Mia and Toby in the kitchen doorway. "But keeping a wild animal without proper permits is illegal in this state, even with good intentions." Panic rose in Mia's chest like a tide. Toby must have sensed her fear because he began squirming in her arms, his claws scraping against her sleeve. The female officer took a step toward them, and Toby's ears flattened against his head. The lead officer knelt down, maintaining a careful distance. His eyes studied Toby's distinctive features, the black-tipped ears, the white-tipped tail, the distinctive facial markings that no dog breed could explain. "That's no dog, sweetheart," he said gently. "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know a red fox when I see one." Tears blurred Mia's vision. "You can't take him," she whispered. "We need to take him to a proper facility," the officer explained, his voice kind but firm. "He'll be safe there. They'll know exactly how to care for him, and when he's ready, they'll release him back into the wild where he belongs." The word wild hit Mia like a physical blow. Without thinking, she spun around and bolted for the stairs. Toby clutched against her chest. She heard Mom call out behind her, followed by the heavy footsteps of the officers. Mia slammed her bedroom door shut, fingers fumbling with the lock. The mechanism clicked just as someone reached the top of the stairs. "Mia!" Mom's voice came through the door, strained with worry. "Please, honey, don't make this worse." "We're not here to hurt anyone," the female officer added. "We just want what's best for the fox." Mia backed away from the door, her breath coming in short gasps. Rain lashed against her bedroom windows, the sound almost drowning out the gentle coaxing from the hallway. Toby wriggled in her arms, and she set him down on her bed, where he paced in agitated circles. "I won't let them take you," she whispered, stroking his russet fur. The same fur that had been so muddy and matted that first night, when she'd thought he was just a lost puppy. Now it was sleek and beautiful, unmistakably wild. Through her tears, Mia glanced at her window. The old oak tree's branches swayed in the wind, its leaves shining wet in the glow of the porch light below. She could hear the officers conferring in low voices in the hallway, discussing whether they should call for backup. Moving quietly, Mia crossed to the window and pushed it open. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and wet earth. She gathered Toby in her arms one more time, feeling his heartbeat racing against her own. Behind her, a key rattled in the door lock. Mom must have found the spare, but Mia was already climbing through the window, Toby secure in her embrace as they disappeared into the stormy darkness. Rain pelted Mia's face as she stumbled across the backyard, her sneakers sinking into the wet grass with each step. The pale glow of the streetlight cast long shadows through the downpour, making the familiar landscape seem alien and strange. Toby was warm against her chest, his wet fur soaking through her t-shirt, but she couldn't loosen her grip. Behind her, voices carried through the darkness. "Mia!" Her mum's desperate call made her heart ache, but she kept moving. Flashlight beams cut through the rain like searching fingers, sweeping back and forth across the yard. "We need to get away," she whispered to Toby, her voice trembling. The wooded trail behind their house beckoned, a dark ribbon between the trees where she often walked Toby. Tonight it looked like a black tunnel stretching into nothing. The mud sucked at her feet as she reached the trailhead. Branches whipped her face, their wet leaves releasing cold drops down her neck. She could barely see where she was going, but her feet knew the path from countless afternoon walks. A flashlight beam swept dangerously close, and Mia dove behind a fallen oak tree. The massive trunk was slick with rain and moss, but it offered shelter. She pressed her back against the rough bark, holding Toby close. His body trembled against hers, whether from cold or fear she couldn't tell. "She couldn't have gone far," a man's voice called out. The wildlife officer, he sounded closer than she'd expected. "Mia, please!" Mom's voice cracked with worry. "You're scaring me." Huddled in the darkness, Mia's mind flooded with memories she'd been trying to forget. Dad walking out the door with his suitcase, not looking back. The empty chair at dinner. The silence in the house that seemed to grow louder each day. Until Toby came, with his playful yips and gentle nuzzles, the way he curled up next to her when she cried, how he made Mom smile again. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. "It's just you and me now," she whispered into Toby's fur. He responded by pressing closer, his wet nose touching her chin. The beams of light danced through the trees, accompanied by the sound of squelching footsteps and rustling leaves. Mia held her breath each time they passed nearby, her heart hammering so loud she was sure they would hear it. But gradually, the lights began to move away, the voices growing fainter. When she finally dared to move, her legs were stiff from crouching. She crawled out from behind the log, every muscle aching. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle, and through the canopy of leaves she could see patches of dark sky. Mia knew these woods well enough to find her way to the creek, where an old wooden shed stood forgotten among the trees. She'd discovered it months ago while walking Toby. No one ever seemed to use it. The shed's weathered walls emerged from the darkness like a ghost. Its door hung slightly crooked, but it opened with only a soft creak. Inside, the air was musty but dry. Through gaps in the wooden slats, she could see slivers of the night outside. Shivering, Mia peeled off her soaked jacket and wrapped it around Toby. He allowed her to towel him off, his amber eyes watching her in the darkness. The floor was hard and slightly damp beneath them, but at least they were out of the rain. "I promise I won't let them take you," she whispered, running her fingers through his damp fur. "You're the only one who hasn't left me." Toby responded by gently licking her hand, his rough tongue warm against her cold skin. The events of the night caught up with her suddenly, exhaustion weighing down her limbs. She curled up on the floor beside Toby, using her arm as a pillow. His familiar warmth pressed against her side, and despite everything, she felt her eyelids growing heavy. Through the cracks in the wall, a shadow moved past, quick and deliberate. Someone was out there and they knew exactly where to find her. Grey light filtered through the cracks of the old shed as dawn crept over the woods. Mia's eyes fluttered open, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard wooden floor. The musty smell of damp wood filled her nostrils, and her clothes still felt uncomfortably damp from last night's rain. Toby stirred beside her, pressing his warm body against her side. His stomach rumbled audibly, and he let out a soft whine that made Mia's heart ache. She hadn't thought to bring any food when they fled. In the distance, the low rumble of engines broke the morning silence. Dogs barked, not the friendly neighborhood kind, but the sharp, purposeful sound of search dogs. They were looking for her. For them. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. The screen lit up. 15 missed calls from Mum. Messages filled the notification bar, each one making her throat tighter. Mia, please come home. Baby, we can work this out. I'm so worried, just let me know you're safe. Please come back. Toby whined again, pawing at the door. He needed water. They both did. Through the gaps in the wooden slats, Mia could see thick fog hanging between the trees. Maybe the fog would help hide them. Okay, she whispered to Toby. We'll be quick, just to the creek and back. She eased the door open, wincing at its soft creak. The morning air was sharp and cold against her face. The fog made everything look ghostly, turning familiar trees into looming shadows. They hadn't gone more than 20 paces when a voice cut through the silence. Mia! She froze. Her heart jumped into her throat as she recognized Holt's gruff voice. Through the fog, she could make out his figure moving between the trees, a shotgun slung casually over his shoulder. He was scanning the woods, methodically sweeping his gaze back and forth. Mia dropped to her knees, pulling Toby close. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she crawled backward, trying to keep low and quiet. Toby seemed to understand the need for silence. He didn't make a sound. The shed appeared through the fog like a dark shadow. Mia slipped inside, closing the door as softly as she could. Her hands shook as she held Toby, listening to Holt's boots crunching through the fallen leaves outside. When his footsteps finally faded, Mia let out a shaky breath. She couldn't keep this up forever. They needed food, water, and eventually someone would think to check this old shed. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch. Toby nuzzled her hand, his amber eyes full of trust. I'll find a way, she whispered, running her fingers through his fur. I promised to keep you safe, didn't I? The hours crawled by. Mia dozed fitfully, startling awake at every sound from the woods. Through the cracks, she watched the grey day fade toward evening. The sounds of engines grew distant, then stopped altogether. They must be ending the search for the day. Dark clouds gathered overhead, promising more rain. Mia knew they needed to move, find somewhere safer, farther from Holt and his searching eyes. We'll wait until it's completely dark, she told Toby, who lay with his head on her lap. But as she peered through a gap in the wall, planning their escape route, bright light suddenly flooded the trees. Headlights. A vehicle was pulling up near the shed. The shed door flew open with a sharp crack that splintered the silence. Mia instinctively pulled Toby closer to her chest, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. Instead of Holt's stern, weathered face that she'd been dreading, she saw the wildlife officer's gentle expression, his eyes kind and understanding in the dim light. Behind him stood Mom, her normally neat hair disheveled from hours of desperate searching, sticking out in worried tufts. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, dark circles underneath betraying her exhaustion and fear. Oh, thank God, Mum breathed, her shoulders sagging with visible relief that washed over her face like a wave. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the doorframe for support. Hot tears spilled down Mia's dirt-smudged cheeks as she pressed herself harder against the shed's rough back wall, feeling the splintery wood dig into her shoulders. The musty smell of old garden tools and damp earth filled her nostrils as she clutched Toby tighter. Please don't take him, she cried, her voice breaking into a sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. He needs me! I'm all he has! The wildlife officer moved with deliberate slowness into the cramped shed, his footsteps careful and measured on the dirt floor. The beam of his flashlight cast long shadows across the walls as he knelt down a few feet away from Mia, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. His voice remained soft and steady, like someone talking to a spooked animal. Mia, he said, his tone gentle but firm. I can see how much you care about him. That love is beautiful, it really is. But he's scared right now. Look at how he's trembling. This isn't the right place for him. He gestured with an open palm at the damp, dark shed with its cobwebbed corners and rusted tools. The air is too damp, there's no proper food, and you don't want him to get hurt, do you? That's not what someone who loves him would want. Mia looked down at Toby, really looked at him, noticing how his tiny body trembled slightly in her arms. His bright amber eyes seemed to reflect her own fear back at her. Her clothes were wet and caked with mud, her stomach pinched painfully with hunger, and her limbs ached from hours of running and hiding. The cold reality washed over her like the earlier rain. She couldn't keep running forever. She was just a 12-year-old girl with nowhere to go. She swallowed hard past the painful lump in her throat, her voice barely a whisper. Will he be okay? Do you promise he won't be alone? The officer nodded solemnly, revealing a fleece-lined carrier. We have a rehabilitation center for foxes like Toby. He'll get proper food, veterinary care, and space to grow with other kits. People who understand his needs. Mom crouched beside Mia. Baby, it's time, she whispered. Sometimes loving means letting go. Mia's lip quivered as she loosened her grip on Toby, setting him gently on the floor, fingers lingering in his fur. The officer opened the carrier nearby. That's it, he encouraged warmly. You're doing the brave thing. That's real love. Toby hesitated, whiskers twitching as he sniffed the carrier. His tail flicked nervously, glancing between it and Mia. The officer placed a small piece of meat inside. After a pause that felt eternal, Toby's curiosity won. He crept forward on tiny paws and slipped inside to investigate. The instant the officer zipped the mesh door closed with a soft rasp, Mia lunged forward with a strangled cry, grabbing the edge of the carrier with desperate fingers. Toby whined from inside, his small paws scratching frantically at the mesh as he tried to reach her, his familiar scent mixing with her tears. Mum wrapped her warm arms around Mia from behind, holding her close against the storm of grief threatening to tear her apart. It's okay, baby. Mum whispered into Mia's tangled hair, her own voice thick with emotion that caught on each word. He'll be safe, I promise. Sometimes this is what love has to do. But Mia felt like her heart was being torn in two, ripped straight down the middle. Each of Toby's frightened whimpers felt like a physical pain stabbing through her chest. The world seemed to be crumbling around her, dissolving into nothing but this terrible moment of separation. A long shadow suddenly fell across the shed's entrance, blocking what little moonlight filtered in. Holt stood there like an unwelcome ghost, shotgun still slung casually over his shoulder, a satisfied smirk playing across his deeply weathered face. His eyes held a gleam of vindication as he surveyed the scene. Finally caught that little chicken thief, did we? He drawled, leaning against the doorframe. Told you that vermin would cause nothing but trouble. The wildlife officer straightened up to his full height, his previously gentle expression hardening into something steely and official. That's enough, sir, he said sharply, his voice carrying an authority that filled the small space. This situation is under control, and this young lady is upset enough without your comments. Your presence isn't needed here. Holt's triumphant smirk faltered under the officer's stern gaze like a candle flame in wind. He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his grip on the shotgun before backing away into the darkness, muttering indistinct complaints under his breath as he disappeared. Mom helped Mia to her feet with gentle hands, supporting her trembling body as they walked slowly toward the officer's truck, parked at the edge of the field. Each step felt impossibly heavy to Mia, like her legs were made of lead, and her feet were sinking into quicksand. The carrier swayed gently in the officer's careful grip as they walked, Toby's occasional pitiful whimpers cutting through the night air like tiny knives straight to Mia's heart. At the truck, Mia pressed her tear-streaked face against the carrier's mesh one last time, her breath fogging the material. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks, dripping off her chin as she whispered with fierce determination, "I'll find you, Toby. I promise I won't forget you." Toby's bright amber eyes gleamed in the darkness of the carrier, fixed intently on her face as though trying to memorize it. His small pink tongue darted out once to touch her finger through the mesh, a final connection, before the officer carefully placed the carrier in the specially designed compartment in his truck. The door closed with a solid, final-sounding thunk, and Mia watched helplessly, Mom's arms around her shoulders, as the red tail lights disappeared down the winding country road into the night, taking a piece of her heart with them into the darkness. 2 days after Toby was taken, Mia sat at the kitchen table on a dreary Sunday morning. The bowl of cereal in front of her had turned soggy, untouched since Mom poured it 15 minutes ago. Her sketchbook lay open beside the bowl, its pages filled with drawings of Toby, his bright, intelligent eyes, his playful tail, the way his ears perked up when he heard her voice. She traced her finger over the latest sketch, remembering how his fur felt under her hand. The graphite smudged slightly where her finger touched the paper. Mum moved around the kitchen with careful quietness, like she was afraid to break the heavy silence that had settled over their home. The coffee maker gurgled softly as she poured herself another cup, her third of the morning. When she spoke, guilt weighed down her words. "You should eat something, sweetheart." "Not hungry," Mia muttered, pushing the bowl away with barely a glance. The spoon clinked against the ceramic, the only sharp sound in the quiet kitchen. The next morning, Mom insisted on driving Mia to school instead of letting her take the bus. The car ride was silent except for the soft hum of the heater. As they pulled up to the school entrance, Mom reached over to squeeze Mia's hand, but Mia just grabbed her backpack and slipped out quickly. Whispers followed her down the hallway like shadows. "That's the girl who kept a fox," someone said in a stage whisper. "Can you believe it?" Others stared openly as she passed. Tommy Martinez, a boy from her math class, sneered as she walked by. "Hey, fox girl, got any other wild animals hidden away?" Mia clutched her books tighter to her chest, keeping her eyes fixed straight ahead as she made her way to her first class. The weight of the stairs felt heavier than her backpack. When lunch period came, Mia couldn't face the crowded cafeteria. Instead, she found a quiet spot behind the gymnasium where no one usually went. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, she pulled out her phone and opened the Wildlife Center's website, something she'd been doing compulsively since Toby was taken. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw a new photo posted that morning. There was Toby, unmistakable despite being in a small enclosure. The caption read, "Rescue fox recovering well." He looked healthy, his fur clean and shiny, though his eyes seemed to hold a wariness that hadn't been there before. Relief flooded through her, mixing with a deep ache of longing. At least he was safe. At least he was being cared for. But it didn't stop her from missing him so much it hurt. That evening, Mia sat on the front porch steps, her hoodie pulled tight against the cooling air. Her sketchbook balanced on her knees as she worked on another drawing of Toby, trying to capture the way he looked in that photo from the Wildlife Center. The scratch of pencil on paper was the only sound until Mom's footsteps approached from behind. Mom settled onto the step beside her, close but not touching. For a long moment, they just sat there in the growing darkness, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Finally, Mom broke the silence. "The officer called today." Mia's pencil froze mid-stroke, her hand hovering over the paper. "They need volunteers at the center," Mom continued softly. Mia looked up slowly, meeting her mother's eyes. For the first time since Toby had been taken away, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her expression. The morning sun painted golden stripes through the trees as Mom's car wound its way down the narrow road leading to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Mia sat straight in her seat, her new volunteer handbook clutched tightly in her lap. Her heart thundered against her ribs as the familiar green-roofed building emerged through the pines. "You okay, sweetie?" Mom asked, glancing over with concern etched on her face. Mia nodded, not trusting her voice. The gravel crunched under the tires as they pulled into the parking lot. Signs with painted foxes and deer pointed toward the main entrance, where the wildlife officer from that rainy night stood waiting. His smile was warm and genuine as they approached. "Glad you came, Mia," he said, extending his hand. "Ready to meet an old friend?" Mia's throat felt tight as she nodded again. Mum squeezed her shoulder before heading to the main office to fill out paperwork, leaving Mia with the officer. He led her down a winding gravel path lined with various enclosures. Some held injured birds, others contained small mammals recovering from various ailments. The morning air smelled of pine needles and fresh hay. "We have strict rules about interaction with the animals," the officer explained as they walked. "Most of them will return to the wild, so we need to minimize human contact, but—" He paused, a knowing look in his eyes. "Some cases are special." They rounded a corner, and Mia's breath caught in her throat. There he was, Toby, looking bigger and healthier than when she'd last seen him. His red coat gleamed in the morning light, and his tail flicked back and forth as he paced his enclosure. The moment Toby caught her scent, his head snapped up. His amber eyes locked onto her, and he rushed to the fence with a soft, high-pitched sound that was somewhere between a bark and a yip. Mia couldn't hold back the tears that spilled down her cheeks as she knelt by the enclosure, pressing her trembling hands against the wire mesh. Toby pushed his nose through one of the gaps, frantically licking her fingers. His tongue was warm and familiar, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed at all. "He remembers me," Mia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The officer knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "He'll stay here until he's old enough and ready for release. You can help us prepare him for life in the wild if you'd like." Mia wiped her eyes with her sleeve and nodded eagerly. The officer handed her a volunteer badge with her name printed on it. She clipped it to her shirt, feeling a strange mix of pride and sadness wash over her. The morning passed quickly as the officer showed her how to prepare food for the various animals, clean enclosures, and monitor behavior. Toby watched her every move from his pen, his bright eyes following her as she worked. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grounds, Mia found herself scattering food for 2 younger fox kits in a nearby enclosure. Their playful tumbling reminded her of Toby's first days with her. She glanced back at his pen, catching his steady gaze. "You'll always be my little fox," she whispered to herself, a small smile playing on her lips. The golden evening light caught in her hair as she walked the familiar path one last time that day. Something had shifted inside her. The raw emptiness of losing Toby was slowly being replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. She understood now that sometimes the greatest act of love was letting go. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.